hoping to do is just kind of start by explaining the system. It's going to take me like 10 minutes probably.
Okay.
But then we nail in, into the details that don't make sense and the pieces that maybe I'm like overlooking or something, Okay, so the general idea is that the donation game is broken, Like when you donate to something, you lose all of your money and everybody else wins a little bit because you're funding a account. Oh no, we lost Rick right away. And he's back. You're back?
Yeah, general idea is that.
Yeah, the general idea is that people who donate lose, and everyone else wins. So in the charity system today that we are like working against ourselves. All the people that want to support charities have to do it outside of their own best interest. And it's actually in everyone's best interest to just sit on the sidelines and hope other people fix it. We go to the extent of like basically taxing people and having this large government infrastructure so that we can take money from everybody and then use it to fund these specific projects. Like these are the two ways we solve tragedy of the commons issues: government taxation and donations. Neither one, I don't think anyone really thinks they work that great, but like somehow a lot of problems are solved by economies, right? So like in our current economy, I have clothes, I have all these things. I'm in an Airbnb right now. I'm able to solve a lot of the problems I have as an individual through the economy, but we can't solve all of them. For some reason, the economy that we have doesn't solve why there's, hungry people or homeless people or, giving enough attention to people with Alzheimer's and, all of these issues, right? And so the idea is, what if we could actually take the ability to create cryptocurrencies and innovate on that to create an economy around a cause that aligns people's best interests, so that when they participate in the economy, these underlying problems that are not being solved can be solved through this economy. So we got Adam from Bright ID. I might as well just use this as an example, right? Proof of uniqueness, right? We want to find a way to solve this issue where we can have a decentralized path towards uniqueness. Now, generally the examples I use are more altruistic, but this example is actually one that could happen a little bit sooner than later, because people who are kind of in the crypto scene and people who are savvy enough with computers could participate in it. And like people who want to, all the experts around like ending homelessness in Istanbul, where I am right now, right? They might not be the most computer savvy. So they probably can't interact with tokens and play these games on the internet, as well as people who want to solve proof of uniqueness and like decentralized identity, maybe as a whole. So here's how we would do it, right? If we want to give people like, maybe we'll even go just to like this proof of uniqueness. We'd find Adam, we'd find other people like Jordy and other people who are deep in the identity game, right? All the groups that did decentralized ID, maybe some UBI people. We'd take as many experts as we can, and we'd say, hey guys, let's do this. Let's start a commons amongst each other where we create a token bonding curve that feeds into a DAO that then funds projects that are trying to create, a unique identifier for every individual, right? So that's decentralized without any central authority. So then you get all these people, and they would need to like, kickstart this thing. So they will raise a bunch of money. Let's say that for this kind of thing, it probably needs to be maybe $1 million. Just keep round numbers, right? So it's like, hey, all you experts, you need to put together $1 million. But you're not just going to donate that $1 million. you're going to actually be able to initiate a system where you guys get one hell of a deal, you know, where you're going to get effectively, let's say, $2 million worth of tokens. And but what you'll do is you'll end up, your tokens will be locked. You can't actually spend those tokens because they're not fully backed anyway, right? By $2 million. This is kind of this market cap. I don't know what you want to call it. Like it's like the market caps are kind of a lie, right? It's like it's the what's the word for it? Like basically the lie of market caps. So the fantasy of a market cap. So you end up with $2 million worth of tokens that are locked until this whole system is S. And what you do is, or the way the system starts is that $500,000 goes into a token bonding curve, and the other $500,000 to buy $2 million worth of tokens. And then the other half goes into a DAO, which is selecting projects to support unique, proof of uniqueness. So now the reason this $500,000 creates $2 million worth of tokens is because the way a token bonding curve works is you have this curve, right? And this curve is going to look kind of like that. It's going to be a logarithmic curve. Looks kind of like square root of x, basically, which is an easy thing to look up. So when they make this big bulk buy, the first tokens, if they were just buying $1 worth of tokens, and when I say dollars, just imagine I say XDAI, because that's what we'll probably be using is XDAI. So if they were buying one XDAI worth of tokens, they would probably get 100 tokens or 1,000 tokens or something crazy, you know? And then, but that last dollar that is spent, that last XDAI, ends up giving them just 25 tokens, right? Or so like they end up with this big bulk buy at the beginning that gives them an average price of, let's just say, for ease of use, 1 XDAI per token, right? And so when they put, or sorry, I guess it had to be 25 cents per token, right? And so then they would end up with 2 million tokens. Wait, is that right? I don't know. I can't do the math in my head right now. But basically, the token, let's say 1 cent and 4 cents. So they put in 500,000 XDAI into the token bonding curve, and they end up getting what is that? 5 million tokens? No, 50 million tokens out. And then, but those 50 million tokens are worth 4 cents a pop. That means that it's $2 million worth of tokens. But this is only because of the market cap, right? If they tried to sell all of their tokens, they'd only get 500,000 back. But they can't sell their tokens. The tokens are locked until they spend, let's say, $2 million out of the DAO. Okay, now the DAO only has $500,000 to start. Well, this is because the DAO ends up being fed by the token bonding curve. So now that they've initiated the curve, it's going, right? And now anyone can buy in to the proof of uniqueness coin. They can just start spending money to buy this coin for whatever reason they want. Maybe they want to support proof of uniqueness, but they weren't in the initial group. And so they want to basically donate, but instead of donating just straight to Adam's awesome project Bright ID, they would actually buy it, get a spec, and then getting nothing other than their name on the wall on Giveth's app, right? Here they would actually get a speculative token, and the first people that buy in are pretty sure that they're going to end up making money because other people, they think other people will buy in after them, right? And so as more people buy in, the price will go up. And then as people sell, the price would go down. But 2%, so like if you buy, let's say the price has gone up to 10 cents now. So people are buying 10 tokens. So they're buying with 1 XDAI and they get 10 tokens. If they burned with 10 tokens, they would get 0.98 XDAI. And 2%, 0.02 XDAI would end up going to the DAO. So basically, what this does is anytime someone sells and takes a profit, by sells, I mean burn their tokens into the token bonding curve, they get a lot of the profit, but some of the profit ends up being almost like a tax to support proof of uniqueness. And so this will create a constant stream of funds that are going to this DAO of proof that is controlled by the token holders to support proof of uniqueness. So then you have these token holders, anyone who's bought into the curve, including the people whose tokens are locked. And the people whose tokens are locked, they're all super experts on proof of uniqueness. That's what's really needed for this whole thing to be a success. They have to know what they're talking about. Otherwise, they'll make bad decisions and people won't want to buy in, right? It would be a bad idea because it will probably fail. But if they're making good decisions and they're making an impact on this research, right? The people who are funding that research now will be like, well, I could fund it directly, but maybe those people who I'm funding should just apply to this DAO, and I'll support it by, grabbing tokens so that, when I sell, I can continue making a profit. I'll just participate in this economy, right? So now you have all these people with tokens, and the experts have most of the tokens, and those experts are incentivized to actually spend money because otherwise their tokens will not be unlocked. So they start spending money on, well, Bright ID, of course, right? Bright ID seems like a really promising thing, and they love the app. So Bright ID will put up milestones on Giveth, which Adam already does. And if the DAO has, let's say, that 500,000 is still there, Bright ID is one of the first projects that proposes, and Bright ID says, yo, we need like 20K. Well, that's a decent chunk of that 500,000, right? So that's, what is it, 4% of the total, did you have a question, Adam? Oh, no, okay, sorry, I saw your hand come up. So that is 20,000 of the 500,000. That's 4% of the total amount. I hope my math is slow today. I did a lot of traveling, but so then you have this 4% is a decent chunk of the total amount, and based on that, it's going to require a specific amount of what we call conviction. We might change this terminology as we've been talking to people who speak English as a second language, and they think we're talking about prisons or something, convicts. So like conviction might change, but for now, let's just use that terminology. So this conviction is how we're going to make decisions in the DAO. This is kind of like a TCR, but it's not a TCR. The DAO governance model, the commons governance model, is not ordering a list. It's selecting projects in a set and deciding based off of how much amount they're asking for, how much money to put into it, or like how much conviction is required, basically. So it's really determining the value of each proposal based off of a percentage of how much the DAO has in total. So now we have people will be using their voting, their token weight. The more tokens they have, the more power they have in the DAO. But also, there's a time dimension. So if I put all my tokens behind Bright ID, and a bunch of other people put a bunch of tokens behind Bright ID, as time elapses, the token weight, the conviction increases. And it's not just like, this many tokens times this many days. It's a little more complicated than that. It basically is like, let's just say like after about 30 days, you get 99% of the total conviction. And as it sits longer, it doesn't get very long. So it's like at the beginning, conviction grows really quickly. And near the end, conviction goes much more slowly, right? So it kind of asymptotes out, very much like the token bonding curve, similar shape, right? So you have this thing that actually makes it so that you don't have to have like set time requirements for people to vote. It's also very difficult for people to come and buy a bunch of tokens and then try to vote something through, because they'll have to spend time and people will see that they're doing something stupid. So they could just sell their tokens, take the profit that this guy put in, so that he would lose money. It actually, basically, this conviction voting scheme is a response to a lot of the issues we've seen in TCRs and that design. And all of this design comes from Michael Zargum from Block Science, and of course with a little bit of input from me and other people. But it's mostly this amazing complex systems designer. He's been killing it. So and conviction voting especially is all him, you know. But yeah, so then when Adam's proposal to get 20K to like fund a couple devs for the next 3 months goes through, that money is still in XDAI, right? And the token bonding curve is in XDAI, and the pool over here is in XDAI, the commons. And that XDAI will then get sent to a milestone. And then when Adam says, hey, like, I'm going to complete this milestone, look, I hired the dev, here he is, right? I need the funds to pay him. The reviewer, if there is a reviewer, will say, okay, yep, this is good. And then Adam will come to the Giveth app and click the button. But when he clicks the button, the money he doesn't get XDAI. He ends up getting tokens. So the XDAI will then be sent to the token bonding curve and create tokens in that moment that he will receive. And then he'll see another button. It's like, you know, would you like to cash out those tokens for XDAI? And if he pushes that button, and let's say just for simplicity, he cashes out all of it, he'll get 98% of what he asked for in XDAI, right? Because the other 2% will again go to funding the commons, go to funding proof of uniqueness. Because anytime someone sells tokens, the commons gets fed. Okay, so I think that's pretty much the whole system. I probably glossed over some things, and I'm sure you guys have lots of questions because that's crazy shit.
Well, I kind of understood most of that. You know, I first saw you present this on your fireside chat with Crypto's News, and you know, I started to dig into the model a little bit more and read some blog posts and spend some time in the Giveth chat room. And I think the reason why I wanted to jump on this call with you today is because my understanding really starts to fall apart, specifically around the token bonding curve, because you said a couple of times that the token bonding curve feeds into the DAO, and that the original people have to be make good decisions, otherwise other people won't want to sort of buy in. But the way the token bonding curve is set up, I don't understand the reason why people would want to buy in later into the token bonding curve. And maybe to specifically pinpoint it, is something you're not addressing in your model is the opportunity cost of funds. So people are going to have funds locked up in this token bonding curve, and it's just providing liquidity. Like, I don't understand the strong need for this liquidity mechanism. Like, why not just get rid of the token bonding curve altogether? Just use a DAO and just get a voting token for your donation. Like,
well, this is the thing, is that donations are a sucker's game, unfortunately. You know, it's like if you donate, you lose your money.
But you're still losing some of your money, right? Like you're getting 98% of your money back, but 2% of your money's lost. So you're tricking yourself into saying it's not a sucker's game because I'm getting 98% of my money back. If you're only willing to lose 2%, then just donate 2%.
Well, but here's the thing. You might actually be making money or losing even more money than 2%. So, like, if you think that more people will buy into proof of uniqueness, this token, then the price will go up. Because this is the token bonding curve kind of has this, the price is determined by the supply of the token. And so if more people buy in after you than sell, like basically if more tokens are minted than are burned, then the price will end up going higher. So you can actually make a profit by supporting this cause.
For people who buy in later, can they sell at any time, or only the original initial bulk that is locked up?
Only the original initialization group is locked up. Everyone else is free. So people can buy and sell instantly.
So people have two incentives. One, they have to care about the commons, and one, they have to care about potentially getting their money back and potentially getting a profit, right? Those are the two incentive drivers for people coming later into the DAO.
Yeah, but so the people who initialize it, right, they for sure need to care about the cause. The people who come in afterwards, there can be many ideas, right? Number one, they could care about the cause, and this is just better than, this is as an alternative to donating directly to Atom. This is even better because they get a token in return as opposed to just losing their money. So it's more competitive. Like they get something, right? And they get to participate. They might even put in more money than they would have because like they feel like they get something in return. And then the people who don't even care about the cause, they might come in and they'd be like, this looks like a really good deal right now. I remember this token, it had gone up a lot before, and now it's really cheap. I'll buy in because I'm going to speculate. I don't even care about proof of uniqueness, right? And that's where it gets really exciting, where speculators come in and provide value and add value to the system that wouldn't even participate if there wasn't this automatic liquidity and this opportunity, this economic opportunity.
So in your example, you said people might look at it. I'm getting some feedback from someone.
Sorry, that might be me. I'll mute myself again.
In your example, you're saying people might look at it and say, oh, the token used to be worth a lot and now it's down, and I think it's a value to come in. Is, in that hypothetical, the higher price that dropped, was that a result of speculation? Or does the token bonding curve change if people come in and out and take profits? Like my first question was going to be, I'm worried that the people later in the curve are going to be primarily looking to game the system and scalp small profits. And if they do that, how does the curve react after that starts happening? Is it going to cause volatility in the price, or does the curve stay the same?
The curve always stays the same. So the curve doesn't move, but the price moves along the curve. So it's like this is the curve. Oh man, maybe I should draw it the other way, but whatever, right? And so this is supply, and this is price, right? Sorry, this is so ugly. I'm so sorry. Right? So the curve stays the same. And people buy in, like people might initialize the curve right here. And so all these tokens are locked. So the price will never really go down below that until they start spending money, and then the price could go down below that. But people might want to buy in more. They'll buy, and then people will sell, and the price will go down, the price will go up, and the token is volatile, right? It's so ugly. I'm so sorry. The token price is definitely volatile, right? But that volatility ends up being a good thing for the commons, right? Because that volatility could even happen in a secondary market, and then maybe you have this on Bittrex or something, and people will see that there's an arbitrage opportunity to buy tokens on Bittrex and sell it into the curve. Even though they lose that 2%, they'll make money just by making plays off of this volatility, where people are buying and selling.
Yeah, so I had a question. So something that I didn't understand until you started talking about it, about token bonding curves, was that there's like an initial locked-in amount that kind of sets where the curve starts. That wasn't clear to me. And so, and then you were talking about how as the funds get spent, that you might potentially dip into that. Does that cause problems at all, or is there like some sort of barrier, like this must never be spent, or how does that work?
Yeah, the money in the token bonding curve is only providing liquidity for the token bonding curves, and then there's this money in another pot that's for the commons. So
Right.
They're totally separate, and
Yep.
it's just that it happens that when someone sells in, some of this money most of the money goes to them, and then 2% goes to the commons, right? But it's when people are minting their tokens. So tokens are always backed, so that curve is always maintained, right? There's like it's just always, this is like an invariant.
Okay.
I think I'm starting to understand it a little bit better, and I think my hang up previously was that these two different incentives people have to put into the token bonding curve. I think is going to see a big split in people from before the initialization bulk and after, right? Obviously, the initial bulk is going to be people who really care about the cause, but I don't know if you're going to have people after that initial amount who are really caring about the cause, but really you don't care. I was thinking, well, those people who really care about the cause, this mechanism isn't really going to motivate them, because 99.9% of people aren't used to getting liquidity back. It's a sucker's game. They know that, they understand it, and that's fine. It's going to be a long time to try and convince charitable people to use a token bonding curve because it's so confusing. So then if that's, if what I think is, that's how it's going to happen, then it really depends on the speculators joining. And I'm still not 100% convinced on that, because speculators have options, right? They could go and day trade Bitcoin. There's tons of volatility coins. There's ICOs. There's, is the demand strong enough that, like, you do all these causes and you have these initial bulks, and then there's no other investment in these onto these token bonding curves, because I don't know if the incentive is strong enough there to bring in the speculators.
Well, what's really interesting about token bonding curves is that you always have liquidity. Look at all the people that are buying into, basically, for lack of a better word, shit coins, right? ICOs with very little liquidity. Like, people buy a lot of these tokens and then they can't sell them. And this is a huge problem, right? And it actually hurts altcoins, because they don't know if people want to buy these tokens. They might hold these tokens and then they're like, oh shit, I have too many. How do I sell them? Well, with this token bonding curve, that's not a problem, because there's always liquidity. They always know. There's like, it's almost like a warm blanket for speculators. They always know that there will be liquidity. There will always be a buyer, because the smart contract will buy it. And I want to go to old school Bitcoin projects a little bit, right? Because like this has been done before. It's not like we're making this model up. There was this awesome, I think I gave the example of CureCoin, which is the best example. I think I said it on Omar's show. I don't remember, but basically, there's this project from Stanford researchers where they do this. They created a program that you can run on your computer and fold and unfold proteins for cancer research and Alzheimer's research, right? So it started way before Bitcoin, and it was kind of an altruistic thing. You could just run it on your computer and support the this research. And then eventually someone created a cryptocurrency for it, right? And so to mine CureCoin, you had to fold and unfold proteins for cancer research. And this blew up. This got huge. CureCoin is by far the #1 provider of folding it's called Folding at Home. It's the #1 ranked on Folding at Home, like by a long shot. I think it has somewhere around 50% of the total amount of being folded. And there's lots of researchers doing this themselves, right? So you can, now people who don't have that have other options, right? Miners that don't even care about curing cancer or Alzheimer's or trying to do any help like that. They point their miners at CureCoin when it's profitable. And speculators will buy CureCoin even though they don't care, right? Or maybe they do care a little bit, right? Like if you're like, for me, I bought CureCoin a long time ago. We're talking 2014, right? Because I was looking at all the different altcoins and I'm like, oh, if I buy this altcoin, well, I'm going to help like Stanford researchers. Whereas if I buy Namecoin, like that's kind of cool. I'm helping like, you know, anyone get a .bit domain. If I buy Primecoin, I'm helping find prime numbers. You know, these are cool coins. I like these coins, but my favorite is probably, you know, curing cancer. Like that would be pretty sick. I'm gonna speculate on that. Now, I wasn't necessarily looking to donate to anything, you know, but I was looking at my options and I was like, well, Litecoin, what does that do? You know, TerraCoin, Feathercoin, these are garbage. CureCoin, that's cool. You know, I'm gonna buy into that. And so you have speculators who come in that don't really care. Maybe they care a tiny bit. And then you have miners that don't really care. Maybe they care a tiny bit. And they will start supporting this just out of acting in their own self-interest. And this is the real magic here, is that we build an economy, like CureCoin built an economy where all the actors in the system, acting in their own best interest, are supporting Stanford researchers to find a cure for cancer, right? And here, with Giveth, we're trying to take that economy system that works in the digital realm, that creates the Bitcoin network, it's finding prime numbers every day, allows people to find a .bit domain, right? We're taking these digital examples of creating a common good and taking it into the real world where we can actually fund digital identities, ending homelessness, also finding a cure for cancer the old-fashioned way, we can fund we can try to capture the value that's being generated in these tragedy commons issues by creating economies around it that actually will capture that value.
Right. So to me, so something that Rick and I talked about, and this was one of the questions that we had like coming into this, was can speculators like crash your whole project? But after listening to what you've been saying, it sounds like speculators can like crash the price for other speculators, but they're not going to crash everything for the people who are putting money in because they care about the cause. Like those people, that isn't like, they're never going to have their like, I guess you could call it a contribution. They're never going to have their contribution be collapsed by speculators. Like if the speculators add value, maybe they'll leave and take away their value, but they're not going to take away that core value that the people who really care about the project bring into it. So I'm less worried about that. And maybe Rick has something to respond to that. But I also have a question for you, Griff, which is, so you talk about how Giveth is going to support token bonding curves. And so I'm wondering what needs to happen or what needs to like be added to Giveth or to be able to make that possible. Like, because you painted this beautiful scenario of you know, creating these milestones in Giveth that are in turn funded by a token bonding curve, and like what are the steps that need to happen before we can actually start doing that?
So, I mean, honestly, we need to do a lot more research on token bond on this system, right? This system is really complex. It took me, I've tried to explain it like at least 15, 20 times. I still can't get it in under 10 minutes, okay? It's way too complex. And like in the real world, in like, you know, if you're building something that's complex, you know, if you're building a circuit, you don't just like write a white paper and then let's do it, right? Like that's what we do in crypto, and that's kind of like bullshit a little bit. Like it's not really how the like, and this is why the rest of the world kind of laughs at us, because we're not doing robust engineering, right? You spend years on a design. If you're going to build a bridge that people are going to drive on top of, you're going to, yeah, you're going to spec out what you think how it needs to be, you know, figure out the needs and requirements for the users or whatever. And then you're going to simulate that using computer software, and you're going to see if it really works. And then you're going to maybe build a prototype and then see how, if that fits the model, and then go back to the simulation when you forget about things or whatever. And then you go back to the prototype, go back and forth a little bit. Then you're going to actually build the bridge, you know, and that whole process takes forever, man. It sucks. That's why we skip it, you know. But we're going to do that. There's this awesome team, Block Science. We're going to formally specify our design in math. We're going to run it through simulations. We're going to see what happens when we have like different actors and different agents working, you know, when we have speculators that are trying to mess with the market, and then, you know, see how it breaks, change our design, add things so that the simulation will work, prototype it, right? And see if when we implement it, if, you know, it's difficult to implement logs in Solidity and this kind of stuff. Maybe we need to go then feedback into the design because of implementation issues. And then we're going to launch it. But we're not going to launch it on like helping the homeless or something, unfortunately, right? What I want to do is I want to launch one of these where we fund token engineering research itself, right? So we take all the experts in token engineering, we get them all to come and join the party, right? We get them all a sweetheart deal on tokens, but those tokens are locked. And therefore, they're sort of locked into this project's success. And all the contracts will be upgradable. Everything will be like easy to be modified by the DAO itself, so that these experts, you know, we're talking Simon, Thibault, and Thibault, and man, I'm just so tired, man. But there's, you know, Trent and all the guys from Token Bonding Curves, a lot of curation market people, all of Protea Labs, Linum Labs, all these guys we're gonna get them all some tokens. We're gonna get them to also fund this thing and bootstrap it, and then see if it works. You know, it's gonna take at least a year before we get a prototype, like something where everything is happening, right? And the token people are voting on projects, and it'll be just for token engineering. And then all the experts will be there, and we'll see this like real big use case, and they'll be like, it could be better. Like I guarantee we're gonna be like, this sucks, right? Well, we need to do this, we need to do that. We relaunch it, and something that we could relaunch it as would be digital identity or some other open source project that is like super crypto savvy people are the experts, right? And then, you know, we relaunch it again for that, and it's like, oh, okay, it's way better, you know. But you know, and we'll just do that 100 times.
Yeah.
And then 10 years down the line, we'll figure out a system that works, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I'm totally on board with being an early adopter of something like this for Bright ID. So I think that if you're the project that's being, you know, that's receiving the funding, that you don't have, there's not a lot of downside. Like you don't have a lot to lose. Like the worst you have to lose is like if you put all your eggs in that basket, you might, you know, your investors might get like, you know, disappointed by what happens if it doesn't work out that the way you're thinking. But let's say that you have like several options for how to contribute to Bright ID. Like one is through a token bonding curve, and then you have your more traditional you know, pay for contracting work plus just donations to the core, things like that. So you have your more traditional models of getting funding, but then you have the token bonding curve on top of that. And for us, it's not looking to like kill Bright ID if like that whole token bonding curve thing implodes somehow. It's just going to mean that like one of the legs of how we were getting funding isn't really available. And yeah, maybe some investors are disappointed, but hopefully like if you go into something that is kind of risky like that, you kind of understand the risks. Like you could be unlike the other models, like you said, donation is a sunk cost. Like, you know, you're losing your money. With token bonding curve, you might have something to gain there. And so why not? And if that's enough to get like the donors off their butts to like, instead of waiting for the next guy to say, okay, yeah, I'll be the first guy because I get a better deal if I'm the first guy. Like that's a big deal to something like Bright ID. Like, how do you get these 100 companies that want to that think Bright ID is a cool idea, but they don't want to be the first one because maybe they lose their competitive edge against their competitor if they're putting money to this thing that is like an open source project, so they would rather keep their money for themselves. And so like, how do you jumpstart that? So I think it's very attractive as a project that could potentially benefit from it. So
yeah, I want to say this is what Giveth was made for. Like, I've been saying it a lot lately, and I've said it before. Like the traceability for donations, which Giveth provides, which is really cool and fun. It doesn't need a blockchain. What we needed a blockchain for is to do decentralized governance experiments in a safe, low-risk environment. Here, if you propose to this to the digital proof of uniqueness DAO, you're making a milestone on Giveth. And what's cool, like before I was saying, oh, you're asking for 4% of the total thing, right? Well, if that's too much and not enough people are supporting Bright ID, you can actually directly, anybody, the Commons is one actor in an open system. Anyone can donate to your milestone and reduce the asking cost, therefore reducing the amount of convictions required to fund your proposal. So like, you're asking for 20K, but then you get 1,000 donation here, another 5K donation here. Now you're only asking for 14K, and like that was already how much conviction is in there. Like, let's say that like now you only need $500 more being or more conviction. Someone can just be like, you know what, for $500, Bright ID gets 20K. Fuck it, I'm sending it, right? And then boom, that's the cascade, right? And so you're encouraging more donations with this Commons as well, right? Because it helps get the milestones passed first. And what's really great, like you said, is that there's no risk to the underlying project. Like, I want to do DAOs for charity, but the last thing I want to happen is like the charitable causes getting screwed, like all the people got screwed who wanted to propose to the DAO. If you wanted to propose to the DAO, it wasn't an open system. You were stuck, like Golem. Golem wanted to propose to the DAO. They had it. They were working on it. It was really cool. Then they had when the DAO fell through. Well, I guess that we put all this work, and now there's no other funding streams. We're gonna have to like do our own ICO thing. We're gonna create our own token. Like Golem, they don't even have an ERC20 token, right? Like, because they were early on. Like they had to build their own system from scratch, right? And people came later. They all copied each other. So Golem decided to kind of, do its own thing. And like, now you won't have to do your own thing. It's like, oh, that whole Commons experiment, it got hacked or it didn't work. There was some bug or governance didn't happen. All the people that were participating, they cared about these cool projects. And the cool projects were like, oh, hey, I'll apply. And basically all those projects that applied got free advertising from the mistakes. So they still win. It's not even a loss. Like, they don't get the money that they thought, but at least all these people who are excited about this experiment and the cause itself heard about your project, and maybe some of them will just donate directly when the whole thing fails. In fact, if the thing is failing in a way that's like governance or something, they could be like, why isn't Bright ID getting funded? This is garbage. I'm out. I'm selling my tokens and I'm just going to fund it directly. It's like a rage quit donation. I'd
like to say something I've been holding based on something you said earlier, Griff, and I want to preface it by saying, I love this experimentation And I know there's nothing that can be done to guarantee success. And I really appreciate the chance to talk about sort of how these things are designed, because I don't want to just come off like as I'm a troll, because I'm still unconvinced on the underlying model. And what we were saying earlier is that, you gave your examples about CureCoin, and I don't know, I think a project that was launched in 2014, based on what it's doing today, I don't think there is a ton of liquidity on that project. I don't know if the market cap's really growing. So if you're using that as an example to sort of justify this model, I think it's still going to remain largely altruistic. And you said that, speculators have this warm blanket of liquidity, but it's risk versus reward, right? Where you take more risk, you can hit 1,000x return, which you'll never do in here. So I think speculators understand that, and I'm still not convinced that it'll happen with this model. But adding on to the conversation outside of just Giveth and token bonding curves, Jake Bruckman made a great Twitter post like in the last week where he asked, can monopolies exist in a decentralized system? And there's a lot of comments back and forth, and there was no real, one way or the other. I think for the most part, no, not in the space. And Joseph Lubin said in one of his very early presentations that stuck with me, when he was getting feedback that, oh, you guys are just going to take over the world, and he said, no, decentralization prevents any subset of actors from taking over the world, right? So using that as like a belief, I think DAOs will eventually address the commons issues, but not necessarily in this upfront way, right? I think DAOs, like I've been a part of recently looking at the DAO Stack community, and in a DAO on their project, you've got the reputation voters, you've got the Gen Curators Network, you've got the proposal writers, and you've got the users of the services potentially that the DAO has. So all four of these have to have their incentives addressed for the system to work. And I think individual or off the start, it's going to be more about launching DAOs that have a crypto project like DutchX or something else that could potentially create a treasury by providing a service that's profitable. And as that treasury grows, the user base grows. And as they do more projects, the user base goes more and more. And eventually that user base has to have their interests addressed. And that's when the commons sort of takes over, given that it's a system that's against monopolies, right? So I sort of see it as readdressing like Matan has written a lot about rivalrous and anti-rivalrous communities. And it's about building a for-profit, growing anti-rivalrous community where sort of commons DAOs will come up at a later stage and will work with the DAOs that are funded and growing a treasury to address the commons of the users. Otherwise, they'll face a competitor from like a clone or a fork because their issues aren't being addressed. So that's sort of my vision of how I see it moving forward. Maybe this other one will work. I have doubts about speculators, in a token bonding curve. And, I don't know if you necessarily need to respond to that, but another conversation I would like to have is token bonding curves specifically, are they working outside of this commons issue? Like, is there a community, or are people looking at using it for a way to sort of like address funding ICOs, for instance, right? Like, because I think it's interesting. I think it's potentially a little bit flawed, or I don't really see how it's going to work, but it's an interesting experiment. So what do you think?
Well, yeah. So let me write this down. So uses. So on the profit-driven DAO side, I agree. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. That's not necessarily my game, But I do like, because I kind of see DAOs as more geared towards the commons. Like even when I was doing the DAO, the whole like for-profit thing, it didn't make me feel like, I don't know, I wasn't really excited about it. I think that it's a lot easier to have a for-profit company than it is for a for-profit DAO, because you can always fork the DAO and open source code and take the profit out, and then you basically have this race to zero. Now, I do think that having an industry to feed the commons, to feed your organization, to feed your like community is really important. And like MakerDAO, for instance, has that industry. They are already doing it. You know, they don't necessarily have like this huge DAO. It's a very weak, simple DAO, but it is this like digital commons. But then you have other groups like Pazlar and all that crew that are creating Etherbank. They're just like, hey, let's just take out the maker inflation, you know? And I feel like whenever you have this like for-profit entity that's open source and digital, like you're basically just saying, hey, who wants to take out the profit? So we'll see. I do think that they will succeed. MakerDAO is sure as hell succeeding. So, and I think we'll see DXDAO succeed, and I think we'll find a lot of other DAOs that will come in and like really power through. I
think that's a good point, that the for-profit DAOs constantly face the threat of someone removing the profit, but it comes down to, are they getting is their incentives being addressed, right? Like if you could go to MakerDAO or any for-profit DAO and the fee is so small and it's so easy and it's better than the competitors, then you don't have a big reason to go and fork and sort of take away those profits. So that built-in threat model means they're going to have to keep their profits very slim, and the profits they do make, they need to make these people happy to prevent it, right? That's sort of my argument, that that's how the commons will be addressed, because you're shoehorning a fee or a tax on the back end, where here it's like just have a really small cost of using the system, and as the system grows, your treasury grows, and your ability to address commons and business issues, right, operations and growth comes out of that treasury. And if you act inappropriately, if you misbehave with those, then that threat will happen. So I think it's important for like how these things launch, right? How these things are designed, how these things launch, so they can get that first mover effect, they can get some network effects, keep everyone happy, and grow from there, right? If it's designed to be greedy, if it's designed to take too much, it'll implode, right? It'll fail. But I still like for-profit models that use that profit to address commons issues. Otherwise, they're going to go under.
Well, the thing is, I think you're underestimating how. Okay, so like the market already has incentive alignments for these for-profit companies, right? It's not about for-profit or not for-profit. It's about creating value. And centralized organizations can find a way to profit and create value running exchanges, right? Like, so you have in the DXDAO has to compete with Bittrex and Binance and all these other competitors and do a better job to bring in more customers, right? Whereas in the commons, in the charity space, right? Like if I'm trying to fund decentralized IDs, or sorry, proof of uniqueness, and we create this economy around it, the competitors are like the Ethereum Foundation, Aragon, and these guys. Well, they're altruistically giving, right, to projects. And if they see a system where, hey, guess what? Like you give and you get, just the work in return. How about you enter this system? You give, you get a speculative token in return. If your governance is successful and more people see the like the economic benefit that you're creating for the world, right, and the value you're creating for the world, other people will get excited and start contributing as well, right? Then you can actually make a profit. That is, instead of, so like turning it around from guaranteed loss to potential loss, there's really nobody in the game. Like there's all of these people who are donating, like this is like donating money in just the States alone, like $500 million industry every year. How much money is being given away, right, for nothing in return? Now, of course, like investing in exchanges, I don't know, maybe that's like or investing in for-profit companies, $1 trillion, and obviously trillions and trillions of dollars going in there. But you have to compete with everyone. Here, like the people who are giving money away, you know, they would much rather participate here, get the good feelings that they're getting when they give the money away, and even participate in choosing, if they really care, choosing where the community, the commons, actually supports and influencing, right? They have the benefit of donating, but then they also have the benefit of influencing where those donations are spent, which is even illegal for foundations. If you donate to a Swiss foundation, you're not allowed to have input, right? Like this is like, I mean, we're talking about opportunity, you know? I would say there's a lot of opportunity to compete in that space, even more than there is to compete in the like, you know, for-profit space, because it's just the alignment, the incentive alignment issues in the nonprofit space are just so fucked, you know? It's like just a completely broken system. Whereas things that are for-profit, well, you can do it centralized and actually make money, you know?
Okay, so I want to say I'm glad you're recording this, because it's getting a little bit difficult to think about what I want to say and also listen and try to interpret what you're saying. So I don't want to go on too much further, but to the one point about how, you know, centralized systems are working now, like if you look at within the crypto space, yeah, maybe they are because it's brand new, but outside of crypto, it's not, right? And using a long-term view, like if these grow and these scale, I think a lot of centralized systems in the crypto space will eventually have to DAOify themselves or else face competition from a DAO. So yeah, in the short term, maybe it's not a good motive, but long term, I think it is. And something I haven't really expressed before, but like look at Ether Delta. It were a DEX, but it was sold, right? So it's really partially decentralized, non-custodial service. And the new owner wanted to do an ICO, and then the community forked away because they were looking after their own best, you know, interests. But what's to say, you know, DAOs can't go in and poach these same communities and say, why should there be centralization that could become corruptible in these partially decentralized systems when we can just run them as a community and make sure our incentives are always aligned, guaranteed, or not, depending on how governance protocol is designed, could do a better job. So I'm not agreeing that for-profit DAOs are going to be harder or more difficult. I think long-term, they're all going to be that way. But I also missed a lot of what you said because I was trying to think of that while you were talking. So we can work on winding this down.
Yeah. I want to say on that actually I totally agree. And I think people will be more excited to experiment with DAOs for charity in a low-risk environment. Like because the hard part here is coordinating in a decentralized way. Decentralized governance is really hard. So if you have a cool model that you want a decentralized governance model that you like, hey, let's buy Ether Delta and let's use this governance model like to run the DAO. Well, maybe you should test it first, right? Before you just like, hey, let's buy Ether Delta and see if this decentralized governance works out. And that's what Giveth was made for, is to really test decentralized governance models in a low-risk environment where you can't hurt investors, you can't hurt like people who are giving up. The only thing you can do is help charities, you know? And so like that's what the Giveth platform is for, is for testing these things before you put in a lot of investment, before you put in a lot of like, you know, work into it. You know, you try it out first and look, you know, you put 10K into it and you try to help end homelessness in Barcelona, right? Adam, you were going to ask something or say something?
No, I was just going to say that I got to go to another meeting, but you guys keep talking and I'll listen to the recording. This is really good stuff, and I appreciate chatting with you guys. So
for sure,
Adam.
I'll talk to you soon.
So there were three things that I wanted to mention before.
Can I just address your one point before you go into those three? Yeah. And maybe it's I'm maybe naive by not being a developer, but you were saying experiment first rather than you buy a DApp and it implodes. But don't you not have to buy it? Can't you just clone the software and clone the code? And as long as it has a profit generating mechanism, if your community can grow around the philosophy of having it DAOified will be better, then it is an experiment with low risk.
Well, except the risk here is that, you know, your DAO might have actually just been like, you know, 10 people who kind of started it. And like there's outside lawyers and governments that might say, oh, actually your DAO is a general partnership and investors bought in and they thought that and your token is a security and that you're going to go to jail. You know, dude, I mean, I did this once, right? And the SEC basically wrote a letter that was like a get out of jail free card. It's like, oh yeah, that whole DAO thing, yeah, it was security, but you're cool. It's okay. You know, like we're not going to do anything.
That is an excellent point. That's an excellent point. What if a DAO launches under different pretenses and then the governance changes it into a profit generating mechanism? I don't, that's an interesting question.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Started out as ending homelessness in Barcelona and then buy an exchange, you know, like let's practice it here, you know, and practice it in a low risk. No one's going to sue you for trying to help charity, try to help people, homeless people, you know, like,
well, couldn't you do the same thing for Fork Delta? Say we're going to DAO and we're just going to have no fees. And then 6 months later, like, oh, we need to upgrade some stuff. So we're going to add a very small fee. And then it, you know, morphs into building a treasury.
Except for Delta, you know, there's people that are putting money on the platform. And if there's a bug or there's like, it gets hacked, you know, like, dude, at least I'm from the States, you know, it's a litigious society. It's scary out there, man. It's really scary. There's a reason Ethereum isn't big in the States. It just doesn't, like, you know, everyone in the States wasn't allowed to buy ICOs. And then also it's just like everything is super, super dicey, you know, like it's just like you get sued.
I'm with you. So your 3 points you were going to say?
Oh, yeah. So number one, use cases that are already using token bonding curves. So actually, the biggest use of token bonding curves is like proof of weak hands, FOMO 3D, and all these Ponzi schemes, right? So the Ponzi schemes on Ethereum have been using token bonding curves for like almost the same model for like well over a year. But the thing is, their curve is like this. It's not like this. Basically, as more people buy in, it encourages you make more profit, right? If you buy in. And so it like encourage, oh my God, if I buy in and I sell in like 10 minutes, I'll probably make, you know, there's this like, it gets bigger and bigger until it all collapses, right? We shape the bonding curve like this so that when you buy in, you're less and less likely to make a profit. And what this does is that you'll get to a certain point and then no one will buy in and people will just start selling. But then you'll get to a certain point here and it's like, ooh, this is a good price. And then you'll start going up the curve and you'll just go back and forth, you know? And that creates the continuous funding to the DAO instead of this big, like, huge swing and then a huge crash. So there's also a lot of people working on this. There's Clover by Billy Rennekamp. There's Ocean Protocol. What they want to do is DAOify like AI bots and use token bonding curves and to basically fund for profit for sure bots that will do that you can hire to like learn processes like machine learning kind of stuff, and then you deploy them to predict if you have Alzheimer's. You say like, okay, these are like a million. Here's a bunch of data of people who had Alzheimer's. Here's all their charts. Send the bots in to learn what's happening, and it's like, okay, now here's someone's new chart. What do you think? Are they going to end up with Alzheimer's or not? Right? And then basically these token bonding curves will fund the different like projects that the bots could learn. Right? I might be butchering, but that's like one idea. There's another token bonding curve group. Oh, you're muted or something.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say, yeah, that's what you're saying is super interesting, because my understanding was missing these other models and how they potentially work to sort of support the model you're using token bonding curves for. So I don't fully understand them, but at least I've got some place where I can go and look more into it now. So that's awesome.
Yeah, actually, in SCC, Simon de la Riviere, I always worry I don't say his name right. He made like a state of curation markets and lists a bunch of projects that are using token bonding curves. And it's like a 10-minute video from FCC. So it's a great resource to see all the people doing it. But yeah, so the two other things that I want to throw out there that this is really bringing in, right, is number one, like one of the things that's not really talked about as much is like what happens, the coordination that happens within an economy, right? And like, if you look at Bitcoiners, right, this idea of Bitcoin maximalism, this is because they have a token that aligns their incentives. Everyone who holds Bitcoin is like, well, I want Bitcoin to go up, right? And then, they buy some altcoins and they're like, well, I also want these coins to go up, right? But I also want Bitcoin to go up. And so it's kind of like you end up with this idea of maximalism, but you turn maximalism around into another way. And it's like, it's a coordination tool, right? If everyone holds the same token, they're more likely to coordinate with each other. And this, you can see it in Ethereum. I mean, I get to see it all the time. Like, look at Mullet DAO, and all these other groups within Ethereum that are like setting standards and coordinating with each other when they're all competitors, right? But they oversee the fact that they all hold this token helps them overcome the idea that they're competitors. Like, you never see Pepsi and Coca-Cola and RC Cola, right? You never see them all collaborating on like a spec to, what the perfect Coca-Cola like formula is, right? They might coordinate around lobbying against like anti-sugar laws or something because they're much more aligned. But in Ethereum, like every organization that holds Ether is aligned just by the fact of holding Ether. Now, let's bring this into like charities. Charities right now, they're all competing for donors, right? And so they would never share their donor lists with people. They would, but what if these charities all held the same token, right? And they could talk about, oh yeah, hey, we're doing this and we're going to propose this project in an open way and tell everyone how we're doing it, right? And then other people can learn from that and improve on it. And they might even be willing to talk to each other because all these projects are actually getting money from, instead of individual charities that want to individualize and separate people, they're all getting money from this commons, and they end up holding this token, which if it goes up, they all win. So they're way more willing. Like, I'm excited to see end homelessness in Barcelona maximalism, save the rainforest maximalism, right? Like, people who hold these tokens and they're like, no, I want to see, dude, I only accept save the rainforest tokens. You want me to work for you? You know, like, you better save the rainforest, man. Otherwise, I'm not playing that game. So, and then what kind of, my second point, which kind of plays off of that, is that you'll end up with these markets, right? Right now, a lot of people will speculate. They buy stock in Google, they buy stock in Amazon. They don't really care about those projects. They care about making money and putting their money in the market because they believe the market itself will grow as a whole. Just like people, you know, most people who are speculating on crypto right now don't actually even care about the crypto projects that are being built. They just think, yeah, I'll probably make more money putting it into Bitcoin or into Ethereum or into Monero, right? And so what if you have that same thing, but your tokens are actually like curing cancer, saving the rainforest, protecting the African elephants? You know, what if instead of the conversation of, yeah, I sold Facebook because it's overbought, and there was some bad news, I don't know, I'm gonna put all my money in Google because I think it's a good buy right now. What if it was, hey, yeah, I sold all my Save the Rainforest tokens because, man, I think they're way oversold, and I need to buy into like saving the African elephant because, dude, that looks like a hell of a deal right now. Clearly not enough people are supporting African elephants, and it's all over the news, all the ivory trade, you know, like, I think it's gonna blow up. I'm buying in, you know? Like, you have this, all of a sudden, these speculators that were just like, why would people trade Google and Amazon when you can save the rainforest and cure cancer, you know?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but for someone to have that viewpoint, they have to have seen the system working already. They have to see it go up and then down to be able to say it's undervalued now, right? And that's where my understanding still is questioned, right? How these token bonding curves are going to incentivize people to sort of have that movement after the initial bulk. But I don't think I can come to that. We can reach agreement on that on this call because there's so much that was said. You know, I'll have to re-listen to it and you know, do some other research. But that's where I'm still sort of hung up on it. But otherwise,
dude, I'll tell you, communicating this to people, to end users, is going to be one hell of a challenge. I'm hoping we can make it simple and just be like, hey, you're buying in, and, you know, the price might go up, it might go down, we'll see. Here's an easy way to buy, and you know, an easy way to sell and burn, and then they don't have to know the rest of the system. But at the same time, dude, even explaining any of this is like, I mean, this is like the biggest problem with crypto adoption, right? Like, in general, it's all so fucking complicated. Like, how do you expect anyone to use this stuff? So, I mean, I think it's that concern is really valid, and it's user experience is going to be like the biggest hurdle to overcome. So
yeah, so that's why you brought up a lot of good points. That's why I see profit incentives being the easiest to launch, right? Like Bitcoin, you had a miner who had an incentive, you had a user who had an incentive, and it could grow. And you know, that's why I'm a fan of tokenization and utility tokens and platforms and so forth. And I'm not quite there on the charity yet, but you've given me a lot to think about. So I appreciate, like you said, how could we have done this through text, through a chat room, and different, you know, it's impossible. So I'd appreciate, you know, if we, you know, get a chance to do this some other time or follow up and sort of just keep driving home the understandings, because it was a lot of fun.
Well, and it's way more fun to talk to someone who challenges the idea than just says yes. I mean, then we don't get anywhere. So I learned a lot in this call too. So I really appreciate you taking the time and hanging out.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Griff.
Yeah, for sure, Rick. I'm sure I'll see you around, man.
All right, talk to you later.